I would like to preface this talk with a question of the relevance and importance of the regional and the local and the national within a globalized world. So the world has changed radically and dramatically over the past 2 decades. Since 1989 and the collapse of the of communism in the European countries, we have witnessed increasing political and economical globalization, and the museums have not been probably the most flexible institutions to respond to these global developments. We would like to talk about how the museums, especially the museums of contemporary art, as the MMK is one, can keep up with these developments of globalization.
We only started to plan that museum actually 10 months ago. I started in December last year at this job. Last Nitro, the director started 2 months later. Building is going to be 53,000 square meters in phase 1, of which 18,000, 20,000 is exhibition space, plus libraries, lecture halls, cinemas, and so on, which brings us more or less to the same size than MoMA in New York, with hopefully higher ceilings than MoMA has. The biggest problem about Hong Kong art is that we don't have any place where artists can develop newer works, where artists can make bigger installations, where artists can be seen on a global level. If you do a show of an artist in Tate Modern, people look at it and people think like, oh, who's kind of that artist? But you need that platform. And then the other big problem is there's no place at the moment in Hong Kong to bring international art in. Other than the art fair and the art auctions, which are a big part of Hong Kong culture, we never see a bigger curated show with some really important artists. We never see a good video show, a good painting show, or something like that. And as you all know, art fairs are not really the place where you see interesting exhibitions. Visual culture certainly is contemporary art, no doubt about it. That's the main thing, and I think that's also the kind of lens we look through all the other things about. Certainly we will have design, architecture. It makes no sense to put walls between it, and that is also, I think, the biggest difference we will have in the M+ is that we don't want these walls in between departments. If you go to the Museum of Modern Art in Hong Kong, in New York, you still have departments. They still have a photography department, and they have a design department, and there are huge walls between the departments. And I think the biggest task for M+ is actually to break up these departments and have a more interactive working relationship.
Does your museum have the aspiration to be a global museum?
It's like is Tate Modern a global museum or MoMA a global museum? It has the aspiration to be in this top tier of the 10 most important museums in the world. But as I said, if you are a great museum, you're actually a local museum. The Centre Pompidou in Paris is a French museum. And if you go there, you know you're in Paris, and you know you're in France, and you know you're in Europe. And the MoMA is the same, and the Tate Modern is also an English museum.
So is it global in terms of significance rather
yes,
than...
it's global from significance, but also about the art you collect. So we will have a strong, very, very strong Hong Kong and Chinese and Asian collection, but certainly there will be American works and there will be other European works and so on in that collection.
Come back to, you don't have any collection at all at the moment. We as MMK do have a collection of about 4,500 works acquired through a period of 20 or 30 years. The Tate has got a collection about more than 60,000 works, correct me if I'm wrong. That was the case when I was there.
Nobody knows.
So,
it depends how you count it, because we have 90,000 works by Turner.
Okay.
So. So we are the home of British art. We begin in the 16th century, but we come right up to the present, and we are very, very active in buying contemporary British art. And we can be a real specialist in British art. And I suppose that's a great strength, I think, that we know what we can develop expertise in and really try and do that well. So this museum, this is what was the Tate Gallery, which was built in 1897, so it's over 110 years old, which in the year 2000 became Tate Britain. So it already has a complicated history. So a lot of what I will show you now is about a building with a history, whereas you were talking about no building with no history almost, and inventing it. And a lot of the work I've been doing in the last year or so is working out what our history is and which bits to emphasize and which bits to not emphasize. The Tate never knew whether it was British, whether it was contemporary, whether it was modern, but the Tate was the word that stuck to that entity, and that's really been its success, and that's why now I think it's become essentially a brand. I'm very interested, I suppose, in the fact that we have a history, and that it's a local and an international history from the very beginning. I think it's more easy to be local and international, probably for all of us at the moment, because we know our locality, but we live in a very international world, and we hear about the international world. And we hear least about the places which are 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers away, where not very much happens. It's not, not in the news. And I think that Tate Britain doesn't represent what's happening in the north of Wales or in Liverpool or in Manchester very well at all, but it's much better at showing what's happening in Berlin, because so many British artists are living in Berlin.